as folks who are going around the room, first of all, was everyone able to at least find one person you could connect with? Okay, cool. So no one has all of your circles blank. Is that correct? Okay, cool. So as you were going around the room and you were looking at other people's paper, were there things that you saw in someone else's paper and you said, man, why didn't I think of that? Or I should have wrote that down. What were some of those things that you saw on other people's papers and you said, I should have wrote that down myself? Yes, sir.
Health room.
Health?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet, sweet, sweet. So you saw health in someone's and said, you know what, I should have added that extra circle and put health in there. All right?
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Yeah, yeah. That would have been a great thing to put down since you did put that down, right? One more thing. Personal success?
Yeah.
So you saw personal success and you said, yeah, that's something that I value. All right, cool. As you were also going around the room, were there things that were more difficult to find someone to sign on, or you actually did not find someone to sign on your paper? And what were those things? Truth? Okay. So please raise your hand if you value the truth, even if it wasn't written on your paper. That is a value that you hold. All right, cool. What was another thing that was either difficult or you didn't find someone to sign on? God, okay. So God, spirituality, human connectedness, if that is of value to you or important to you, even though it wasn't written on your paper, please raise your hand. All right, cool, cool, cool. One more thing.
Mountains.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, what was that?
Mountains.
Mountains. If mountains, if nature, being outside is important to you, even if you didn't write it on your paper, please raise your hand. All right. And lastly, yes, ma'am.
I just said loyalty for others.
Loyalty. All right. So either being loyal or having someone being loyal to you is important. Please raise your hand, even if you didn't write it on your paper. All right. So what's the obvious lesson in this particular activity? What's the obvious lesson?
That we all have different values.
That we all have different values. All right.
But we're really similar.
But they're also very similar values, right? So we're also very similar in our values. Yes, ma'am, you had your hand up. Okay, you guys are like tied. You're tethered. All right. Yeah, so all too often, I don't know, how many people have been to a diversity training before or cultural competence training or sensitivity training or anything like that? Please raise your hand if you have. Okay, cool, cool, cool. You are the people that I have to fix. Because all too often in those trainings, we spend a great deal of time talking about our differences, but we don't necessarily spend that same amount of time talking about the ways in which we are alike. And so that's the position that I come from. And it does not mean some other things, and I'll talk about those things as well. But what it does mean is that it is important to recognize our humanity. And that understanding is what leads us to actually changing things in our society and changing the way that people think. Because if we change the way people think, we change the way they live. And it is also important to realize that individuals are the ones who change societies and not necessarily governments. It is individuals who change societies, not necessarily governments. All right? So there's that. So I'm really curious. I've done this activity a few times, and so there's some follow-up questions that I have, and I just want to check my hypothesis with some follow-up questions in this particular activity. And so I'd like for you to raise your hand, if you feel comfortable, raise your hand if one of those 4 things that you wrote down on that piece of paper have something to do with your ethnicity or your race. So as you look at those 4 things, did any of those have to do something with your ethnicity or your race? So you raised your hand. All right, great. But the majority of us did not raise our hands. Is that correct? All right, so I have one person raise their hand, and the majority of the class did not. All right, cool. So my next follow-up question is, those things that you wrote down on that paper, how many folks had something that had to do something with their gender or their gender identity? Okay, so you had something. Okay, you had something that dealt with your gender and your gender identity. All right, cool. And lastly, for this follow-up question, so we had one person for the race or ethnicity question. We had one person for gender or gender identity. And lastly, what I want you to do for this one is I want you to jump up and down, wave your hands in the air like you don't care if you can say yes to this next question. All right? So my last question for this particular piece is simply this. As you wrote down those things that you valued or you found that were important, was your social economic status one of those 5 things, or one of those 4 things that you wrote down on that piece of paper? So you wrote down your economic status?
What I want for my economic status.
So you wrote down what you want for your economic status or what your economic status is?
Probably both.
Okay, so probably both. And you wrote down your economic status?
Well, not necessarily directly, but personal success to me has something to do with,
Okay, so personal success has something to do with it.
right, jumping social economic classes.
Okay, so maybe jumping social economic classes, but specifically,
No.
did either one of you, so what would you say your social economic status is? Oh, she said poor. So did you write poor down?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. And for you?
No, I didn't write. I wrote security, and when I wrote security, I meant money.
Okay, okay.
Like, I want money so that
So-
I'm secure.
Okay, so we can massage that now, and I'll accept both of those, but I want you to be clear about what the question that I asked, right? So we're going to go there. And so what I'm really curious about, and we'll get to you in just a second, but I'm curious as a class, why is it, do you think, that the majority of us did not write down, when I asked you what was important, and I asked you what else?
What we value.
What you value. So what is important to you and what is of value to you? Why did we not put our race or gender or our socioeconomic status as those things that are of value or importance to us? Yes, ma'am.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's not what's gonna like keep you alive. You know, that's not what's how you like. That's not how, what you identify with. I mean,
Okay.
I don't describe it, but
So at the end of the day,
like for example, you don't need your race. Well, at least I think you don't need your race or whatever to be happy. Where some people need family or friends. It's a
Okay.
little more, in my mind, makes more sense that you need that.
okay, so for you, race is not something that you need to be happy. It's other things that you need to be happy, and some of those things that you wrote down. Okay, cool. Other folks, why did those things not show up for us? Yes, ma'am.
I guess I've never looked at it that way. Like, I value being a woman.
Okay,
I've never looked at it that way.
okay. So you valued being a woman, but you never really thought about
Yeah,
as something that you actually value.
yeah,
Okay,
I guess so.
okay, cool. Other folks.
So maybe some people just maybe not value their current position, but more so like you say, value where they want to be, not exactly.
Okay, so people may not value where they are, but they may value where they want to be. All right, yes, ma'am, and then I'll take your hand next. Oh, the two of you next. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe like that's just something that is more obvious that you don't need to express to people. Like everyone should value who they are. and
Okay.
Where they come from, like their ethnicity. So maybe that's why, because it's not like something like these things aren't something that you would know just by looking at someone. But I mean, like race and your gender is something that you would know right off the bat by
Oh,
looking at
really?
someone.
Okay. So you're an anthropologist.
No.
All right. So tell me my race.
African American?
Huh. Interesting. So African American is a race.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So where did you find out that African American was a race? Where'd you read that?
I don't know, classes.
What class?
Several classes in the past.
Which class?
I don't have any specific ones.
You took them.
History classes.
Did you pay for those classes? I'm picking on you
yeah.
for a reason because we'll come back. So thank you for letting me do this.
Okay. I don't know any specific classes. I mean, that's just something that I've known for a lot, my whole life.
So you've known your whole life. So you came out of your mom's womb
Okay.
and said African Americans is a race.
Okay, so my point is that I feel like race and gender are something that's not, it's not as a high of a value or something that we need to specify to people because they're things that people can see.
Okay,
Where these are things that people cannot see, that we do have to express to
okay,
other people.
cool. Thank you for letting me wrestle with you. We're gonna come back to some of the stuff that you gave us to talk about, all right? So we'll come back to that. And you were next and you were last. Yes, ma'am.
Well, so to piggyback off her a little bit, like inherent, sort of, but like I thought about it like with money, if I lost that, I would recover and be okay. If I lost my kids or my family, that would be devastating to my well-being
Okay,
in my life. So that's how I looked at the value of it.
okay. Cool, cool, cool. Yes, ma'am.
I guess, I wouldn't have thought about it in that context with why didn't I pick gender or race and things like that, but for gender, at least for me, I don't know the other question, but, you know, if you don't necessarily identify with your gender in certain ways, then that's not, like, I think women are wonderful and women are to be, I mean, I'm a woman, it's not like, but like there's, like, I don't necessarily identify with women as often as other women do or something like that. So that's not something that when I'm thinking about my world, my gender is not something that really comes up.
All right, cool. So part of the reason, that, and I'll just give it to you, that you did not write those things down is because you're smart. You're smart, yes. You are absolutely brilliant. Because you did exactly what I asked you to do, which was what? What I asked you to do? Write down things that you value and that are important to you. Now, what I'm not suggesting is that race and or gender or socioeconomic status is not important. I'm not saying that it's not important. But I am saying that for each and every one of us, that those things aren't as important as some of the values that we wrote down, right? So what were some of the things that you were thinking as you were responding to those questions?
Well, as far as my gender, family, my offspring, I do value being a giver of life, but
Okay.
it's just something that's important to me.
Yeah, she said, I value being a giver of life. Just rub it in, okay? Rub it in. All right. And in terms of your race or ethnicity, what were some of your thoughts as
I know
you
it's probably kind
were?
of stretching, but I put my there like resources, respecting where we come from,
Okay.
the land mostly.
Okay, so respecting the land and knowing where you come from and having some ties and connections to that. Yeah. I think those are great things, and I think those are important. I think that oftentimes, though, we since we don't know some of those things, for example, how many people would consider themselves to be white? Raise your hand if you consider yourself to be white. Okay, cool. We'll talk about that as we continue throughout the lecture. And so one of the things that's extremely important is that we recognize our humanness and our relationships with other human beings, right? So what is humanity? What is humanity? What is humanity?
A collection of all people.
It's a collection of all people, all right? So are they like just sitting somewhere in a big petri dish? What is humanity? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe it's the values that we all share.
Okay, so it's the values that we share. What else is humanity?
Interaction.
It's interacting, okay. And typically, what kinds of ways do humans interact? Yes.
Have to do with like cognitive ability.
Okay, so it could be something to do with cognitive ability, all right. Being social, all right. If I have a low cognitive ability and someone has a high cognitive ability, am I still human? Okay. So what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human?
Not to be an animal.
You're going to tell, you can't describe it by what it's not. Tell me what it is.
Well, that's tough because instantly I want to, somebody walks around and has, but those physical things can be changed too when you're still a human, so it's kind of a tough question.
So what is humanity? I mean, what is a human? What does it mean to be human? To be able to process, okay? And what?
Or just to be able to conceptualize.
To conceptualize things, okay? This is a psychology class. I should be getting like tons of answers. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think if you go with cognitive awareness, though, then you have people that only have a brain stem. So then if you go with that, they are not human then if you go with cognitive ability, because they do not have cognitive ability. They don't have the physical parts of their body to have cognitive ability or awareness of themselves.
So tell me what does it mean to be human?
I guess just to be acknowledged as human by another human.
To be acknowledged as a human by other humans, right? What else?
To be human is hopefully we all have, like, humanity has some bad points, but it is human, I feel, to care about other humans. Humanity is to care about one another.
There are two specific traits that I want. There's tons, but there's two that I want to kind of leave you with. And one, to be human means to be recognized by another human being. Two, to be in service of other humans. And thirdly, to be in relationship with other humans. Right? And so, yes.
So the reason that, so you could argue with the person that doesn't have anything but a brain stem, the reason that they are still human is because they're recognized and they're in a relationship with humans, even if they're not conscious of it. They have a relationship with them.
That's right. They have a relationship with other humans. They're recognized by another as being human. And they're also, we also should be in service of other human beings while also taking care of ourselves. I'm not talking about slavery. I'm talking about actually having cooperative relationships. And so our humanity, it can only be recognized when we're in relationship with other people and that we're in a mutually beneficial relationship with them. That's when we are expressing our humanity. All right? And so humanity becomes the process of relationships, giving these three particular principles. There are other things that we won't get a chance to talk about today, but I do want to leave you with that. The other thing that I'd like to leave you with is this concept of the human soul. And so one of the things that is really important for us to realize is that systems and individuals, when they want to conquer people, either individuals or groups, one of the things that they have to do is that they have to break their human soul. They have to break people's will to survive, their will to do, their will to further their cause or even further their biology. And so there are two parts of the human soul. There is the physical body, and there is the spirit, the animating force that inhabits individuals, right? And so one of the things that I recognize about the human soul comes from my own personal experience. My grandmother passed, and in our family traditions and in our spiritual traditions, we have something called an open casket funeral. And so the person is laid out in this nice shiny box with it had pearls, pearl inlay. Oh, it was just absolutely beautiful. I don't know what she's going to do with that in the ground, but it was important that she was in this pretty box. So she's laying in this pretty box, and it's the tradition that people will come up and say their last goodbyes to to the deceased, right? So she's laying in this pretty box and makeup, I mean, just looking good, right? And actually, she looks better dead than she ever did alive. It was the bizarrest thing. So she's just laying there, and people were walking by, and I found it interesting that people were talking to her, and when I went up to talk to her, it was very clear to me that the house was there, but nobody was home. There was a vacant, the house was vacant, right? So her physical body was there, but her spirit was not. And then I found it very interesting that after we do the whole service thing, we had this dinner afterwards. And this was really strange because everybody brought spaghetti. There was like 15 different styles of spaghetti. Somebody should have brought something like some ribs, some chicken mole, something. But everybody brought spaghetti, so it was really weird, right? And so we're sitting around, we're telling stories about my grandmother, and we have pictures of my grandmother, and we're passing that stuff around, and it almost feels like my grandmother is there, but she is powerless. And so when the body is separated from the spirit, the body becomes a thing, and the spirit becomes powerless. Right? So it felt like my grandmother was there, but she wasn't necessarily there. Right? So her spirit was around. And so one of the things that we have to recognize is that when we're talking about psychology and we're talking about people being whole and healthy people, part of it is that we have to make sure that there is a balance or a connection between their body and their spirit. And one could add the mind as well as a part of that. But I like to use this as a simple example because I think it does a really good job of pointing out my particular point. And so one of the things I think is very interesting is I have some, and I was a part of this in the past, and I don't participate in this any longer, but before I became as self-actualized as I am today, I would participate with other dudes, and we would go to these seedy places called strip clubs. I know, it's bad, and I apologize to all my sisters, right? But I was young, I was dumb, I know better now. But the thing I thought was very interesting was that we would go to these strip clubs because, why would we go to these strip clubs?
For entertainment.
For entertainment, all right?
Naked women.
Naked women.
For alcohol.
For alcohol.
Spend money.
Oh, she got a list. She was like, oh, make it rain. Right? So one of the things I think is very interesting was I guess I won't call his name. But one of my friends, we went to, so I lived in St. Louis for a while, and I don't know if you know what St. Louis is like, but there's this other place called East St. Louis, and in East St. Louis they call it East Boogie, and anything you want to do, you can do in East St. Louis or East Boogie, right? So my friend and I, we get together and we're going to go over to the strip club or whatnot. And so we go in there, we pay our money, and just goofy, young, dumb kids, right? So we get over there, and then the lady, they said, here comes Lexus Mercedes, sugar nasty mama, So the lady comes out, she's doing her thing, she's like, oh, right, and she take off her top, and then she take off her little rap thing, she's like, and then she take off the other thing, and she stands there, and she's like, and then I see it. She had a C-section from hip to hip. And then I say to my friend, that's somebody's mama. You see, it's real interesting that guys will go to these strip clubs because these aren't women on these poles. What are they? They're strippers. And everybody knows that a stripper is not a person. And so when we separate the spirit of the individual, then we end up with a thing. And what do we do with things?
Don't respect them.
Whatever we want to do with a thing. I don't care what my hammer thinks about me throwing it in a bag, leaving it in the rain, leaving it on the porch, because it is a thing. And when we see people as things, then we disregard their spirit. And if I can separate a person's body from their spirit, they become a thing, and then whatever they have to say becomes less powerful because there's a gap. And so what typically happens is that there are tons of things trying to occupy, trying to split this human soul into these pieces that are less powerful. And one of those things, so once that crack happens, and we'll talk about the things that cause the crack, what is left in between when the body and the spirit start to be separated is a void that is created. Now here is the key to, well, I'll just tell you. So this void gets created between the body and the spirit, and you'll hear people talk about it. They'll say, you know what, I just don't feel complete. There's some kind of hole in my life. And when people have this void between their body and the spirit, when these cracks, when these assaults start happening to people, there is a monster that's out there waiting to fill that void. Guess what it's called? Free market capitalism. I don't know, have you ever seen a commercial that actually made you feel better about yourself? I mean, beside the herpes commercials. The herpes commercials, they are living life in those commercials. They're hang gliding and bungee jumping, and they're all happy. But free market capitalism says, you have a hole in your life, buy this product. It'll be better. Drink this drink. Have these relationships. Axe commercials are the ones that I hate the most, next to GoDaddy. Those are the two commercials that I just hate them because, Axe says, if you're not cool enough, use this spray, and then any undiscerning woman will come sleep with you or make you complete. But the young man who just committed suicide, the Academy Award-winning actor, Philip Seymour Hoffman, had everything. Elvis, Janis Joplin, John Belushi, Michael Jackson for that matter, right? All of those folks had everything that we're supposed to have to be successful. But they also had what? They had the void. And so part of our job as helpers in this human experience is to make sure that we help close this void, avoid this stuff. Now, is it okay to have fancy cars, big houses, lots of ATVs? Yes, you can have all of those things as long as you're not using them to fill this void. Because you'll never have enough. You'll never have enough boyfriends, girlfriends, drinks, alcohols, clothes, shoes. You'll never have enough because all that stuff gets evaporated when you're trying to fill the void. But I will tell you that when you are a complete and whole person, those things feel a whole lot better, right? Because they don't define you. And if they get taken away from you, it doesn't define you. One of the things that particularly, I don't know where you guys live in the cities and whatnot, but I find it very interesting that particularly urban poor kids, and particularly, more specifically, urban poor black boys attach such value to their shoes because their shoes help fill that void. So I won't eat lunch today, but I'm going to get them new Jordans. And I'm going to bug my parents until we get those new Jordans, even though we might not have cable, but we're going to get those new Jordans because that defines me. And what happens when somebody steps on those Jordans?
Oh, God.
It's on like Donkey Kong. You know, like, woo! Throw them bees. I'm old, so that's what I'm saying. Bricks. Throw them bricks. So that becomes important. That all too often we'll see, and we'll talk about what this void is and how we can help close the void. All All right? So there are a few barriers to humanity that I want to talk about as well. One of those barriers is this concept of race. Is a barrier to humanity. And what is a race?
What you check off.
What you check off, okay? Yes.
Well, in the video we just watched, that was a sign, one of the opening lines was how race isn't how you are, or how you perceive yourself, it's how society defines you. Because, I mean, you could be African American, you could be, it's too much of a blanket statement.
Okay. So
It can't be defined.
So it can't be defined.
I think it's socially made up, like, there really isn't, there's one race and that's just humans, like, we're all like 99.9% genetically the same thing.
Okay. So there's one race, human race. How many races are there? Let's start there. How many races? What's that? Numerous? Give me a number.
I don't know.
7? 22?
Well, in a way, it doesn't exist, though. I mean, people use race and ethnicity interchangeably, but race doesn't exist.
So what is your name again?
Ashley.
Ashley. Ashley said she knew my race. So if it doesn't exist, how is it that we have forms to check off?
Society's created it.
It's constructed.
So it's constructed. Society constructed it. Okay? Barack Hussein Obama shows up how? How does he show up, racially or ethnically?
Depends who you're asking.
Depends on who you're asking. What would most folks say about Barack Hussein Obama and how he shows up in the world?
Black.
That he is black is what most people would say. Is that the sum total of who he is?
I say he's a mixed biracial.
You would say he was biracial. All right? And why would you say that?
Because his father is from Nigeria, I think, or some part of
Kenya.
Kenya. I knew
His
it was
father's from Kenya.
And his mother was Caucasian.
His mother's Caucasian, a white woman from Kansas. And they got together and they Obama'd. Right? So folks could say that he is African American. Folks could also say that he is biracial. So he could say he's black. He could say he's biracial. And if we follow that racial logic, he could also say that he is white. Now, how would people respond if Barack Hussein Obama walked around saying that he was white?
That is delusional.
Yeah.
They would say he was a sellout.
It's hard enough for people to believe he was born, nonetheless, to believe that he would call himself white. Why is that?
I think that, well, not on the white part. I was thinking more like on the black side of it, you know, like because he is biracial and his mom, you know, had met his father who is black. You know, from back in like slave days, you know, if people back in those times when slavery existed and they had biracial children, because white people hated blacks so much that when they did have interracial children, they just considered them black. Like if you had any ounce of black in you, regardless if you were white, you were just all the way black. And I think that has stuck with our society, that even if you're biracial, you're black. Because you're mixed with black, you're just black, and the white of you doesn't exist.
Okay. Other folks. Race. How is that a barrier to humanity?
Because there are stereotypes about different races that keep others from affiliating themselves.
Okay, so there are barriers, there are stereotypes about certain races that keep people from actually having authentic relationships with them because of these artificial barriers. Right? So the concept of race is problematic because what it says is, and what's the foundation of the argument around race?
There's a dominant race.
So there's a dominant race as part of it.
And that race makes people different.
And that race makes people different. But let's talk about what are the theoretical underpinnings? How did people get to? How do we even have these assignments? Did people just out of the blue make this up, or how did this come to even be a conversation?
We did it to justify slavery in a way, because if you look back in like older civilizations, people separated each other based on religion and not race. I think that it was really just to justify, oh, well, they're a different color, so they're a different type of person, and so that way we can dehumanize them and treat them like crap.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
But the Egyptians and the Israelites did it, like there's been a lot of, I mean, it has been because of race, I don't know, somebody from this spot doesn't like somebody from this spot, and they do look different, and they have enslaved each other. I mean, sometimes it's because of religion, but sometimes it's because of socioeconomic status, sometimes it's because they didn't like the color. I mean, for Germany, it was look and religion, and I mean, it's been an issue, but a lot of other things are too.
Yep, it's been an issue, it's been a lot of other things. The thing I do want to identify that is different about antiquity and current day, there was no distinction of races. I mean, exactly what I just said. There was no distinction of race. So when I was an Egyptian, I was not a black Egyptian. I was not, there were no scientific, I gave my thing away. There were no scientific categories there were the Hittites and the Shetites and the Canaanites and the blah, 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 blah. But that was not associated with a so-called race.
I thought they started with only 3 races or something.
Yes.
Okay, so
Who is they?
I can't remember, but I thought that there was
Come on, who is they? So Zeus? Is it Zeus? Was it?
I don't
Who
know.
is they? Who is they? Give me they.
Society in the world.
Society in the world. So who is they? Who is society made up
The
of?
philosophers.
Philosophers are who? People. Right? So people. So people made up this concept of race. And now here is the underpinning, and you have to be very clear about this, particularly when people try to talk about this race thing, that there was one scientist whose philosophy became the underpinnings of our current understanding of race. And his name was Charles Darwin. Who is Charles Darwin? He is the evolution guy. And what did Charles Darwin say about humans?
The fittest will survive.
That the fittest will survive. What else? Come on, let's do it. It's the elephant that's in the room. What did he say about humans and humanity?
Well, didn't he say that certain humans progressed farther than other ones, so that there was a dominant?
And so where do we start? According to Darwinian, as monkeys. Now here is the problem which has led to this even conversation about race. The problem with that. Now I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I am saying about the social implications of that thought process has been problematic for us in modern day times. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but every time I see that chart that goes from the gorilla to the modern man, I'm always somewhere in the middle. I'm never at the end. What I mean by that is that when people talk about this concept of race, brown and black people are always attributed in their characteristics, in their cognitive abilities, as being on the lower end of that evolutionary scale. And at the front of that, consistently, I have experienced that there are people who don't look like me who are on the most evolved end of that. So that's problematic. That concept of race is problematic. And we have to have a critical thought about what those theories mean for us. Because the other part of that is also a problem with race is this concept of whiteness. Whiteness is problematic. What is whiteness? What does that mean?
Can do what you want.
Privilege.
It means privilege. You can what?
Do what you want.
You can do what you want.
White in America.
I don't
What-
worry about getting pulled over.
You don't have to worry about being pulled over. What is the one principle that holds whiteness together as a concept? What's the one thing that holds whiteness together? What's that?
Power.
Power?
I mean, not literally, not in reality, but I mean, in a sense.
Not in reality, not in a sense, okay. So those people who raised their hand and said that they were white, can you raise your hand again? Okay, cool. Where are you from? Where are your people from? As best
like
you know.
way back.
We're going as far back as you.
Irish, English, and German.
All right, ma'am?
I have no idea.
Oh, you got some idea.
No, my family hasn't really tracked where, I really don't know. I know there's some German.
Okay, cool. Then we'll start with that. Sir? You raised your hand, right?
Yeah,
Okay, what?
German.
German, okay, cool. Ma'am?
Irish, German.
Irish, German. Anyone else? Yes.
Irish and Indian.
Irish and Indian.
Ukrainian, Irish.
Ukrainian and Irish. What's the one thing that holds whiteness together?
Everybody's European.
Everybody's European.
Community and?
Community. So all those communities are the same.
Physical appearance.
The physical all those physical appearances are the same. Is that true? So all these white people look exactly the same? No.
Light skin.
A sense of superiority.
It's the buying into the concept of whiteness. It's the skin color, right? So all white people, the thing that holds whiteness together is that people say, because we look this way, we must be the same. What's the problem with that logic? Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that there are other things that don't come into play with this, but I keep on getting told I'm privileged. I grew up without running water.
Yeah. What?
I no, just no. And like there are I realize there's other things that play into that, but I am not the same as somebody who maybe is close to the same color as me that has parents that pay for everything.
So part of what the institution, in terms of this race, part of what whiteness does is it says that all white people are equal. And that's not true. All white people are not equal. There are white people who have to worry about getting pulled over. If I'm white and I got dreads and I got a red and black hoodie on and a cop sees me, I'm concerned about the cop pulling me over. Why?
They associate dreads with smoking weed.
So they think I'm a weed smoker. So, you know, I gotta be concerned about that, right? So if I'm a white boy in Frogtown and my pants are sagging, I got my hat to the side, I got my little lean on, do I have to be worried about being harassed by cops? Probably. Now, is there a spectrum in terms of how my pain lines up with somebody else's pain? I don't want to necessarily get into that. But there is this concept that all white people are the same, and it's not true. And you can listen to white people talk about it themselves. What do white people call white people who don't measure up to a level of sophistication that most white people think they should? Call them white trash. What else do they call them?
PWT.
BWT?
PWT.
What is that?
Poor white trash.
Poor white trash. They call them PWT. They call them gigolos. They call them wiggers. They call them all sorts of stuff, right? Rednecks. They call them all sorts of stuff. And so what we have to understand is that this concept of race is a barrier to humanity, to recognizing the completeness and the wholeness of an individual. So what I suggest, I don't suggest you walk around saying, there is no race, only the human race. But I do suggest that you look past these things and say, what is true about this human being or these human groups? What is true and good about these human groups and not just about this race? Here's an example I want to give you, a practice, if you will. What I'd like you to do is I want you to think about a stereotype about a group of people, right? So these folks steal, or these folks are drunks. These folks can dance. These folks can't jump. right? So I want you to think about a stereotype about a group of people. And now what I'd like for you to do is I want you to take both of your hands and put it around your family tree. And I want you to shake that family tree and see if any of those people fall out of your family tree. So do you have someone that's a drunk in your family? Do you have somebody that's trying to get over on the system in your family? Do you have somebody who can't dance, or somebody that should not be left alone with the kids in your family? Right? So whatever we can say about another group of people, we can also say about our own group, and we can even say about our own family. All right? So can I have about 4 minutes to do one more principle, and then we'll take a break for how long?
10-ish, 15 minutes.
Okay, 10, 15-minute break. So there's that. Well, you know what? Any questions so far? Because I hit you with a lot of stuff. Any questions? All right, let's keep rolling. All right, so, barriers to humanity. Let me make sure I hit all of those things. We'll get to those other. So that's the first barrier. So racism and whiteness. The next is historical trauma. Has anyone ever heard of historical trauma or knows anything about historical trauma? Have you ever heard that? Okay, so what do you know about historical trauma, or how have you heard it framed?
I'm a drug and alcohol counselor for a Native American facility, and so we do a lot on intergenerational trauma that natives have experienced over the years.
Okay, cool. Just real quick, anybody had something stolen? Something big stolen? Anyone had something stolen that was pretty big?
I had my wallet stolen, but it had money and credit cards, and it was
Okay.
pretty.
So money and credit cards in your wallet. Other folks?
I had groceries and a microwave stolen from my car.
Okay, so groceries stolen out of your car. Okay, cool. Anyone else?
I had a GPS stolen out of my car in my driveway.
Okay, all right. So can we use your GPS as an example? All right, cool. So do you know the brand of your GPS?
I have no idea.
Okay.
For that.
If you saw your GPS, would you know that it was your GPS?
No.
No? Okay.
I had an iPod stolen out of my car. The Apple iPod.
Okay. So it was an iPod? What version?
It was the newest one. I think it was the 4 at the time. I just bought it.
You just bought it. What color was it?
It was pink.
Okay, pink.
Well, it had a pink cover on it.
Okay.
It had like 1,000 songs on it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pissed.
Yeah. Now, were those 1,000 songs you purchased?
Bought.
Or okay, you gotta ask that question sometimes. We got pirates. So let's go with your iPod, right? So you know, if you saw it again, you would know what it looks like, right?
Yeah, because it had all my stuff on it. Like it had my screensaver on it. You know?
Okay, so your screensaver. Okay, so let's say it's stolen. You come back home and you see your neighbor on a jog with an iPod that looks very much like yours.
I would turn on my Find My iPod locator, and if it came up next to me,
Uh-huh.
I would go take it back.
Okay, so you go to take it back, and your neighbor's like, "Get up off of me! What's wrong with you?" Now what?
I'd take it back.
Okay, but your neighbor now calls Brutus in the game, and so now it's like 6 people standing there, and you're gonna try to take this iPod back. Now, what do?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm not a violent person. I would probably call, I filed a police report, and I had the serial number and all that other stuff, so I'd probably call the police.
Okay, so you call the police, and the police come and do what?
They would look at the serial number. They would pull up the information and match the serial number, give it back to me, arrest her, I don't know what they would do.
Okay,
I mean, I filed a police report with.
that's
the
exactly what they would do.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed you call the police? I thought they'd come with like a CSI kit or something, do some fingerprinting, something. But they come and they take a report and then they go back to doing what they were doing. Right? So now you have the police report filed. You've already confronted your neighbor. So now you're really upset. So you take them to the small claims court because you got all your stuff. You got your serial numbers and all this kind of stuff. You stand in front of the judge. You say, "Judge, this is my iPod." The neighbor says, "No, it's not. It's mine." The judge looks at all your evidence, looks at all their evidence, of which they have none, and says to them, Neighbor, you get to keep the iPod. How do you feel about the judge? Piss. How do you feel about the system so far? Piss, right? So now you're 6 months passes, it's springtime again, and your neighbor comes over because they're having problems with the iPod. And they're saying, you know what, I don't know how to get this thing. Can you help me with this? I know you know something about iPods. So what do you say to your neighbor?
Sure, let me see, I'll show you.
Like, sure, let me see, right? So do you feel like helping your neighbor out? No. How do you feel about your neighbor?
Just pissed that they even have the audacity to come over.
That they have the audacity to even invite you to participate in their craziness, right? This is the root of historical trauma that Native Americans experienced all the time. That stuff was taken from them. Now they have to watch other people have fun, use their stuff, and not get the benefit themselves. And then people will say, look, we've carved out this little piece of the world for you to live in. You can't grow anything there. You can't do anything with it. As a matter of fact, we'd like to run some radioactive particles and sewage and oil through that land while you're on it, since you're not doing anything with it anyway. If you can just do all that. And we then wonder why people are feeding on themselves, because they try to scream out and fight a system that they can never win, and so they start feeding on themselves. They use drugs and alcohol to help medicate themselves from generations and generations of this historical trauma. And the funny thing about historical trauma is that that word historical gives us the impression that it is something that has happened in the past, when in fact it's something that happens on a day-to-day basis. And so historical trauma is a barrier to people realizing their humanity. I went over time. Let's take 15, and I'll see you right after the break. Thanks.